Hey, everybody. Amy with Life Redesigned, where we grow through what we go through. Hey, if you're watching this video live, you're seeing some new branding up here. You're seeing my Flirt Fitness studio branding. I thought that would be very fitting to kind of add in on here while we talk about a little bit of the journey of my brick and mortar studio, Flirt Fitness. So let's dive in. Last week, we ended Truth Talk 2, and today we're moving into Truth Talk 3. Picking up where we left off to talk about the studio that I transitioned into. So at this point, I had transitioned into the new studio and really just went for it. I talked about taking that risk. I went for it and kind of just was like, okay, this is going to work. I've got to figure out how to make this work. So I talked a little bit in our last episode about how I was working my tail off, and boy, was I working my tail off. So I want to start out by saying, how many of you, asking, I should say, how many of you have ever heard that saying, anything worth anything is hard work? And today, this part of my story and this part of Truth Talk is so brings that full circle and brings it really to hit home for me, because now when people come into the studio, and now being 11 years down the road of when I started, it's really easy to see like the branding and the consistency and the strategies and the systems. It's really just easy to see how well functioning the space is. And I even just what people tend to forget, and I even tend to forget, is that it was not running that way when I opened. So as I opened the studio, I didn't know what else to do besides teach. And I taught a lot. So I was at the studio every single night, Monday through Thursday. I was also I was teaching our private parties Fridays and Saturdays. So again, I was teaching about 15 classes per week. If I didn't have my son, I was crashing on the crash mat with a little blanket over top of me, because in between all of that teaching, I was making choreography. I was creating a curriculum. I was painting the walls. I was tearing up the carpet. I was putting on molding. I was trying to figure out, all the logistics behind the admin work of who is paying, who owes money. So just think back to this for a minute. You guys, 11 years ago, we didn't have the technology that we have now. So it has been so insane to look at how I ran my business before to what I can do now. So if you're out there thinking to yourself, I want to start a business, listen, it couldn't be a better time for you to go for it. There's so many online businesses and so much that you can do from home. It's a luxury. I didn't have that luxury when I first started. I had to be at the location. We didn't have Google Drive. We didn't have Google Docs. We didn't have any of that stuff. So the way that we communicated was in person. Hi, I need to talk to you in person, because we had to watch our minutes. We couldn't text each other, right? We had like landlines at the studio. So it was a different time. And looking back at it now, it's like, wow, are we blessed to be able to do what we can do with the technology that we have. So that's where I was at within the studio, teaching a lot. And I quickly realized this cannot be forever, because my body is not going to be able to keep doing this. So pretty early on my teaching career here, I tore a ligament in my shoulder. I tore it pretty bad, actually, and it was just solely from overuse. So a shoulder injury is the number one injury in pole fitness, and I got it in 2013, which was the year I launched my studio. So I got it in the summer. Remember, I launched in January, so I got to a point where it was like, okay, I've got to figure something out. I've got to be able to somehow duplicate myself in here, because how else are we going to grow? And I just really want to spend time with my son. So as I started to kind of think of ways to do that, what I did was I started to really leverage people within the industry, people within the realm of doing what I was doing, to help train my people, because I didn't have time. So very early on, We had a sister studio at the time, and I would hire new people in. The training program was nothing like what it is right now, which we'll talk about later on in the Truth series. Right now, we have an onboarding system that has, a whole bunch of documents that people look at. They go through videos and checklists, and everything's automated, and oh my goodness, it's so simple. So because I was teaching so much, I didn't have time. I didn't have the time to train these people. Here's the other thing, you guys, when you are working in your business, there comes a point, and depending on how fast you're growing, you have got to duplicate. Okay. And in order to duplicate, you have to delegate. I drive this home in every training that I do, and with all of my clients that I coach. You cannot be the end all be all. You can't, okay? I don't even care if you have enough time. You can't be the end all be all for every single thing in your business. You've got to start putting people in place if you want to grow. If you don't want to grow, you can be the end all be all, but that is going to get heavy very, very quickly. So, within that, what I began to do is I began to hire like-minded people that had a growth mindset, and I shared with them my vision. I had them shadow me because I didn't have time to go teach another class. And when I felt like they didn't have any more questions to ask me, I threw them to the wolves. They started teaching, and we just stayed in communication of how's it going? How are you feeling like it's going? And we built a dream together. On top of that, I actually shipped them off to our sister studio to go look at a space that I knew we would be like in the future. So remember, my space was very, very, very tiny. And our sister studio had already been established for years. Their instructors had already been certified and trained for years. So the requirement was, if I hired you, you actually had to drive 3.5 hours to the sister studio and go like shadow a bunch of people. So thank the Lordies for my friends over there in the sister studio that allowed my people to go over there and do that, because they came back and they were like, okay, I got it. So we were not that way, but then now they knew what the dream was and what the vision was like in order to come back and help me build that. So together, we built a curriculum, and then we tried it and a bunch of stuff didn't work. So we built it again. And then we did that and a bunch of stuff didn't work, and we built it again. Together, we created these systems going, you know what? I think it might work easier if we actually do this. So as I got people coming in to teach, slowly, I could back up and go, if we did this, this could be a little bit faster. If we did this, I wonder if we could actually do this at the same time as if we did this. I wonder, right? So I started to kind of like be able to see everything as a whole, and my mind just went crazy. So I am a strategy lover. I am a systems lover. I love to plug in. I think that's part of the reason why I've always loved to be an athlete. I love to be coached. So I love to be, challenged and driven and coached and motivate. Like, I love all of that stuff. So within all of that lies this entrepreneurial brain that was like, because I'm such a big picture thinker. So I started to notice where we needed strategies. And as I met with these employees one-on-one, hey, how's it going? Tell me some things that are going great. Tell me some things that aren't going. So what I started to do was gather information from the people that worked there. I gathered, and then I looked at the information and went, okay, these are all the similarities of what they're saying are not going very well. And then I kind of thought, okay, what is the solution to what it is that they are saying that's not going well? The solution could either be A, B, or C. And then I would choose, because decision-making is really important as a business owner. I would choose, and then I would implement, and then I would watch. And then I would see how it goes. And sometimes it worked beautifully. Other times it didn't work. And I had to step back and go, okay, you know what? I think we should have done option A instead of B. Let's switch this around. Let's implement. And then I would hold people accountable. I didn't just implement it, take my hands off and go on my merry way. I implemented. I checked in. I dotted all my I's and crossed all of my T's to make sure the implementation worked. There's always a gray area when you first implement something new. There's always grace given until, at least for me, We always do about 60 days. And then finally we kind of start to like, really lay down the line a little bit more. So that is how we started to really build the business. And when I tell you really build the business, with everything that has happened in my life and people that have come and gone and people that are still in my life from the beginning and people that are not, I won't ever claim to have built this business by myself. There were some very key people at the beginning of me growing that really truly believed in the same dream as me, that helped me really create my vision and create this dream to be able to help women all across these cities and really all across the world now because of my coaching and how I'm helping people open studios. And I'll always be grateful for that. So, a quick lesson of grow through what you go through. A lot of those people, some of those people are not in my life anymore for various reasons. As I continued to grow, there were certain things that separated us in our lives. And I don't look back and look at that as such a bitter time. What I do look back and I look at it as more of a grateful time. I hold on. I'm going to start to get a little emotional. I hold on to the really good times that we had, and I hold on to the laughter and the love and the heart that was created behind this name and this brand. So while some of the stuff that happened was very bad and I'm very scarred from it, it's not that I try to ignore that, but I just try to hold on to the good. And I try to remember that if it wasn't for that time, if it wasn't for all these crazy valleys that we went through, it wouldn't be where it is today. Because when we moved into that space, you guys, I sold a dream. I didn't have mirror. I was just telling this story last night in classes. I remember when I finally had enough money to tear up the carpet because it was like industrial carpet and I couldn't tear it up on my own. I tore up the carpet. I had to hire a person to, I specifically remember it was $600 and he didn't have the money. And I had to hire a person to tear up the industrial carpet so that I could lay down new, just like carpet squares in the gym. And in order to do that, we needed a machine and I didn't have $600. So I had to wait until I had $600 for that to happen. I paid the guy. Well, then I had to wait till I had the money to put the carpet squares in and I had to wait till I had the time. So as people would come in, I'd be like, oh, just wear your shoes to the studio door, like inside the studio room, and then take them off and then come in. And then I didn't have mirrors for a long time. And so I was like, the walls were white and drywall and there was dust falling on our heads. And then I finally had enough money to get mirrors. And then they were like leaning up against the wall. And I was like, make sure you don't get too close to the mirrors because like they might fall. We don't know how stable they are. Oh my goodness. And then I finally got enough money and had enough time to hang the mirrors. And then people didn't have to walk to the bathroom to put their shoes back on because the carpet being removed wasn't so dusty. Then I laid the carpet squares down. So little by little, literally brick by brick, I built this space and hand by hand and heart by heart and memory after memory. And it doesn't mean it didn't come with valleys. I remember sitting in tears. I remember this specific time that I was so worn down. And this was fairly early on, you guys, in my career. So this was probably once fall hit of 2013. I had already expanded in my studio. So I had 2 rooms running at the same time. I expanded into 3 and we finally had our grand opening like 8 months after we started the studio. And it was crazy. So I invested in that. I paid cash for it. And I specifically remember at that time, I mean, the company was pumping. Also at this time, there was not boutique fitness like there is now. I mean, pole fitness was very new. Boutique fitness was very new. It just didn't exist. Now you've got like Orange Theory and boxing and yoga and stretch lab and Pilates. Like that just wasn't around when I started. So as we continued to go, it was very overwhelming. I had a really hard time growing, keeping track of everything because mind you, like I was like, I don't know if I can afford a system to keep track of everything. So I was keeping track of everything on paper. I would highlight somebody in yellow if they owed half money. I would highlight them in pink if their card swiped on the square didn't go through. And I would highlight them in green if they were paid in full. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, Amy, I took a class in 2013 and I actually never paid. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened because that's just totally, I feel like how it went back then. So anyways, so as we went through like all the the growth and the trials and tribulations and all of that, I just became so very thankful for everything that I was going through, because truly I was growing through what I was going through, on every step of the way. So a little bit later, as we go through this Truth Talk series, next week I want to start to really dive into a lot of the trials that come with being a business owner. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth it. The risk can be scary, but it's definitely worth it. So I'm going to share back again. Oh my goodness, if you're looking at this, I've switched sceneries and I'm now in the airport. But I wanted to follow up and kind of give an extension on the Truth Talk Part 3 series. So, as I was traveling through opening the studio and kind of, just going through all that we were going through, I really started to see and feel a lot of growing pains that were happening in the studio. So, a lot of what was happening is, my why was definitely being challenged. So as I continue to grow and we continue to add things to the curriculum and add things, add more classes and more people, there was just hunger for more, and there was hunger from staff and students to add, to try. And one thing I really stayed true to was I stayed true to my why. I stayed very, very, very specific to why it was that I was doing what I was doing and what my end goal was, which was to empower women to have a safe space to get stronger, to feel comfortable in their bodies, and to be able to get, to have that community space that they had really been looking for. So other things like fitness classes or, offering co-ed classes, things like that, just were challenged. And what started to happen is I started to make decisions. And you know how that goes as a business owner. As you start to make decisions, you can't please everybody. So slowly but surely, what started to happen over the next few years, business wise, was I started making decisions, and there was people that didn't like them, and they started to push back. So from about 2014, when we just like catapulted into growth, as that started to happen, a couple other things happened. My personal life began to kind of like go through an ebb and flow. I ended up getting engaged in 2013 in a hurry, and was emotionally not in a space that I should have done that. And so personally in my relationship, I was I was in a way failing, and trying to understand how to set those boundaries. I had been through a lot of toxic relationships in my past, and I didn't quite have a handle on, I didn't at all have a handle on what I wanted my personal life to look like. I didn't understand how to attract versus like beg and be unhealthy, I guess you could say. So I ended up getting engaged. I was really quickly, like nobody really understood what was going on. And that relationship ended just as fast as it started. It was very quick. And so there was just a lot of like, okay, like what do I need to learn here? What just happened? Like, how am I going to grow through this? And to be frankly honest, I don't know that I did, because I just had to like keep moving. The business was going really fast. So in yeah, so that was closer to heading into 2014. And then heading into 2015, I was really ready to step into what I thought was a relationship that I was ready for. I ended up getting on eHarmony for like a week, and ended up meeting somebody that I really fell in love with very quickly. We got married 6 weeks after we met, without telling anybody. And I'll expand a little bit more on this later, but what started to happen is now I had to start to juggle something else. So as I expand and kind of share with you a little bit of my personal life, what started to happen around this time in 2015 was a couple things. I had been through a failed relationship of an engagement to a man that's actually now deceased. So rest in peace. And as I continued to build, I didn't understand what it was like to have healthy relationships. And I found out very quickly that not understanding that didn't make my business thrive. I attracted the wrong people, and I also attracted and allowed the wrong people in my life for too long. So I'll talk a little bit more about personal stuff next week, but I want to expand a little bit more on the business stuff this week. So as I continued to grow in 2000, I opened the studio in 2013, and in 2015, I opened a second studio. And in order to do that, what I really started to figure out was like, okay, how do I duplicate every single thing that's going on here? If I were to leave tomorrow, how would this place actually keep going? And how would I be able to step away? So I worked nuts, crazy, crazy, crazy nuts on how to create processes that could be duplicated and how to duplicate myself and how to duplicate my staff, right? Because what we needed to do is I couldn't plant myself into two locations at the same time. Instead, what I needed to do is I needed to basically oversee. So I needed to have people that could do everything that I could do, but somehow I needed to do what I was doing, what I needed to do, if that makes sense. So what we did is we focused on writing down steps of everything that we did with our job description. Side note, that sounds really easy, but I don't know about you, but for me, it was a challenge. It was a huge challenge for me to write down in my head how I did what I did. Like even today, people are still like, how do you do all this? You know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like writing it down was so hard, which was so hard doing that in franchising too, which we'll talk about later. So that is what we did. So we duplicated in 2015. I also expanded into another space in 2015. And sooner than later, in 2016, I expanded again to have 3 studios and an expanded first studio. So all of this was happening. And what started to happen is we grew really fast. I started to take my hands off things. I started to trust people that had a different why than I did. So I can't stress enough to keep your focus on your why and to really stay focused on what it is that you want. And yeah, we'll keep moving into that. So as we continue to move forward, my why stayed the same, but what I found is that the people that were within my why started to shift just a little bit. So things like really pressing decisions I was making, really going against what it was that I wanted for the space, going against things in our business model, you know, talking behind people's backs. To make a long story short, what really started to happen is I started to see true colors unravel. And in a lot of people, when you magnify that, things can get really messy. And we know that saying, when you have a bad apple, it can ruin the whole bunch. And that's exactly what happened. And because of my personal life and the direction that that was going, I took my hands off for too long and allowed the space to get infected for too long. So this all took place within, between 2015 and 2018. And gosh, that sounds like such a short amount of time, but looking back, it really felt like a lifetime. Those 3 years, I gave everything that I could to my business and to my personal life, and I found out exactly where I needed to be. So my ending thought to you for today's message, as we travel into a little bit more of the personal side of the things that were going on next week, are this. Lessons I learned as I went through these 3 to 4 years. I know things can look like a certain way up front, but really make sure you know who you're hiring and allowing in your space. You need to hire for the right reasons. You need to be very clear on why it is you're hiring this person, what you expect from this person, and you need to be very clear on what they can expect to you, to be honest. I didn't do that. I learned the hard way. So that was a big hard lesson that I learned. Was I just thought, because this is what I wanted and this was my why, I just thought people would follow. Like, I guess I was a little naive to really think, people would deceive you and people would hurt you and people would go against a business model that you created, even though they're just stepping in and working there. So I think part of it was just being really naive, and part of it was a lot of mistakes that I made. So that was one. It's something I've really learned is I have to be a lot more careful and a lot more clear on who I hire, why I'm hiring them, what I expect from them and what they can expect from me. I'm very open and honest about, my why and the driving force behind my company, as well as my personal life, because small business, whether we want it to be personal or not, it is. So I'm very clear about the kind of person I am. I talk about that in my hiring process. I ask very detailed questions in my hiring processes, and I don't make any quick decisions. Also learned that by mistake. Another thing that I learned in this process is don't allow that apple to stay. Don't allow those bad apples to stick around. When you've got an intuition about something that's happening, somebody that shouldn't be there, something that might be going wrong, it's like I compare this to like a motherly intuition, I have like motherly intuition with my children, or just, I think a woman's intuition, really, whether you're a mother or not. We have these intuitions that really kind of go, I don't know. And really need to trust those intuitions. So, especially as a woman, we need to trust the intuition of, this isn't right. It doesn't feel right. And I know in our heads as a business owner, we can get really wrapped up in, if I make this decision or I let these people go, who's going to do their job? Or I wasted all my time training, or I wasted all this money. You know what? It doesn't matter, because I'm on the other side of it. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter. What needs to happen is you need to stay true to you. And you need to let those people go sooner than what you think. You need to follow more important than that, you need to follow your intuition. You need to trust your intuition, and you need to work slow enough and smart enough so that you can follow that.
Once again, Delta's paging
okay. So those are two big lessons that I learned I've been going through this during that time. Another big thing is the trusting process. Be careful who you trust, choose who you trust, be aware of why you trust them, and don't be afraid to let go. Sometimes the scariest part of something is you can trust somebody for a long time, and then you can get to a point where you don't trust them anymore, and that's okay. And you can also get to a point where they're in your life, and then get to a point where you have to let go, and that's okay. And sometimes we learn that what we attracted at one point in our life doesn't match what we want to attract right now. And now we have to attract the beautiful process of letting go. So like I was talking about earlier, I wish I would have seen the exit process of these people in my life more beautiful at the time, like I do now, because I am thankful. I am grateful because of the journey that we that we all did together. So really, really listening to that and attracting not only the people you want in your life, but knowing that if you got to a point where what you attracted before isn't what you want to attract now in your life, that it's okay to now attract the beautiful piece of letting that go. So food for thought, just thinking about those three things. Those are some huge trials that I went through, which there's so much more to, which I'm going to save for my book for next year. Thanks for bearing with me for the choppiness of this podcast episode being done half in my home and half in the airport. So next week, I'd like to dive in just a little bit more into the personal side of some things that I traveled through. I think a lot of people, social media can be hard these days, and a lot of things can look really, really good from the outside, and people don't understand the trials and tribulations that you went through on the inside. So I'm going to share just a small portion of that next week as we head into week 4 of our truth talk. And that will kind of like wrap up a little bit more of the personal side up to this point. And then I have a surprise for you for our truth talk to continue in December. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking about these. I'd love to hear from you if there's anything you can relate to. If any of this is stuff that you've gone through, and just know that you're not alone. Life redesigned and really redesigning your life is about growing through what you go through. And every step of that way is important and it matters. And I think the most important thing here is for us to not feel alone. So I believe in you. You've got this. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon. Okay.